Welcome. So today I'm going to be going through this deck profile that I used at the World Championships. The thing is that this deck profile I actually came up with it in the very morning of the event. So I've actually spent the 2 months ever since BCS when I did qualify grinding this deck, and let's just say I didn't really find, even when I saw like a deck list that I really liked, I ended up in these situations where it's like I tried for a bit, amazing results, and then suddenly I started just seeing like the deck just basically going poop, and then I'll just shift and try a different list, and it was just a constant vicious cycle. The thing about this format right now is that it's super demanding, more demanding than I think some people realize, in that, so the World Championship results aren't actually surprising, considering like what I've seen in all the testing I've been doing, and it's sort of part of the reason why this whole Regalia list ended up being a bit of a mess, was basically because the two decks I was having issues with were both Reindeer and Steam Maiden. But it wasn't just simply a case of can this deck beat Steam Maiden or Reindeer. The thing is that this deck is always trying to compete against itself, and there's a lot of consistency issues that take place, and you have to kind of keep up with the tempo of the game, and that's basically the root of the problem that I was having with all the testing I was doing to try and kind of just make sure that Regalia list stayed fairly consistent enough. And unfortunately, there'll be great times I'd have against Steam Maidens or Reindeer, but then I'd just suddenly have like these really bad days. And well, my Worlds result kind of reflected my worst fears. So no matter how much I change the list, there's always a different issue presenting itself. I end up trying out loads of different cards. So I said that this list was one that I came up with in the morning, even though I've come up with like 1,000 different lists on the way to actually the event itself. In fact, it was so bad. The night before, I registered my deck code, changed again the next morning, and I kind of almost barely forgot to actually hand in my updated deck list. So there was some issues with that as well. But basically, I've tried out like all these different cards. Like this massive stack here, you can see. This is just some of the cards that I've been trying out as well. So it's that insane. Like I don't know, like this card for example, I really want to play it. So Steam Maidens, Reindeer, they're very fast decks, and if they go first, they obviously get the 2 force markers minimum, and of course they ride down to grade 2, which then means that the other player has to really kind of make that turn 3 impactful. Regalia has an advantage in that they can use Marduk, but the thing is with Marduk is that you're really using it for the triple drive, and yes, you've got Sea Yggdrasil and 2 Norns, which can get you the restand plays, and you've got Force 2, so these are the plays that are supposed to help you compete against these sort of decks. The issue is that it's, well, it's not the most consistent thing in the world. A lot of players who've touched Regalia, I mean, you can see why it's highly represented in events. In the case of like just this kind of consistency issue that it has, because it's always fighting itself. So if something goes very wrong, which happens quite easily, then you feel like you're many steps behind, and now your opponent's playing this very fast and consistent deck, is doing a lot better than you. Especially because being able to grade 2 game, if you go back to G era, grade 2 gaming was really useful, because what it meant is that you could slow down the pace of the game, so that if you didn't have all the stuff that you need, all your pieces, then basically you can play the grade 2 game and then buy some time. Obviously with V-Series, people started riding up more often, and because of that, that meant that if you didn't have the greatest hands early game, you couldn't really try to kind of make up for it as much. So with Reindeer and Steam Maidens, they sort of do grade 2 game back, only problem is that they hit harder, and unlike other ride down decks, like say Nightmare Dolls, for example, those two decks, they kind of just keep on like scaling and scaling. So obviously you've got more axle markers in Nightmare Dolls, but the thing is they have to actually occupy all those axle circles, right? Whereas Steam Maidens have got Entrana, which is just +1 every time, as long as they have Soul. You got the Cat, which is basically a free you +1 back, but obviously it gains more power as the game goes on. Force markers obviously make your attacks even more powerful if you're using them for multiple attacks, i.e. timing per dragon, but even more dangerously with Reindeer combos, then it gets even worse. So these are all things to look out for, and we've also got Rollock as well, which can also punish you when you do ride up while your opponent's on grade 2. So obviously your main advantage is the fact they play grade 3 heals in some decks, not all decks. So like grade 0 heals, they are played by, like some people do play them in Steam Maidens, and that's a way for them to actually kind of make up for the loss advantage, whereas a lot of Reindeer decks have, I've noticed, been playing grade 3 heals, which obviously is a disadvantage in some cases if they're going for the ride down strategy. But that's something they do miss out on, but you can't always capitalize on that advantage, and Rollock is there to kind of offset that downside. So once you do your ride up Marduk turn going second, then the problem is that your opponent then gets a first stride, and they have a very, very dangerous first stride. Even if you do survive it, you will be devastated, and it'll be very hard to bite back. And usually they might have a good defense by then. Like, for example, Bearlock, in the case of Steam Maidens, is one of the issues that I would have when I'm trying to bite back as well. And Schlichma does devastate my hand enough that I might not be able to build a proper board to actually swing back in the next turn. So these are the sort of issues that I was finding. Now, to try and make up for the tempo issues, as you can see in this list, I'm actually playing quite a few Vanguard skill cards. You can see V-Series Ordinal is in there, and you can also see I've got Ruijisa. These are some very, well, Ruijisa is decent, but like Ordinal V-Series, this is sort of like a very, it's sort of like a leveraging card. So you're not going to get every game, but if I do get it, it feels like it just gets me that kind of like little bit of swing of luck. To sort of make up in some of those games. So the idea was, okay, if I can just ride Ordinal in like maybe a few of the games at Worlds, then that might help me at least like swing the games more in my favor. But also, Ordinal is a Soul Charge 1 draw, so if you do get it later on, you can just sort of set up Marduk more easily as well. And I was kind of banking on the theory as well that people won't damage deny. So Regalia, one of its weaknesses has been damage denial, but the current format in a way does have like lends some advantage to Regalia in that damage denial isn't really a common strategy, because the Steam Maiden and Reindeer players do actually prefer to just swing when they can. They don't really like to do damage control as often. So because of that, if you know how to kind of play with the damage like moderately enough, like decent enough, then you should be fine. That's the idea anyway. So yeah, I want to have like Vanguard ride abilities. If you're comparing it to say like this card here, Flap Angel, I really like this card, but there are a few problems with it. Firstly, it's a rearguard only ability. So even in G era, you couldn't just ride this and then search for your specific grade 3. You had to ride a different grade 1 and then call this to then be able to use skill, which made it more demanding on the hand. Obviously in G era, you had grade 2 gaming, which was done more often. You can't really grade 2 game Steam Maidens and Reindeer. You're kind of just putting yourself into a losing position by doing that usually. So that's obviously a thing that I couldn't really rely on as much. So I did have to kind of cope a bit and kind of just depend on the luck on my deck that I would see Yggdrasil as well without using this, and also because I want some card economy, because the deck does suffer if it doesn't actually build some card economy. So I don't really want to be in a situation where I'm calling a sort of dead card to the field and then that's it. You -1 from hand just to get your pieces, but then you're basically doing this all for like one big turn, but then once that turn fails, you don't really have as much hand, and then you probably will die next turn. So that's sort of one of the reasons that led me not to play this card in the process. I'd rather have like ride things, but the thing is that V-Series Ordinal obviously does clash with the original Ordinal, so they're the same name. I did sort of want to play Ordinal because that card has won me a lot of games, especially in events as well, in that it's kind of made those final turns impactful because I was able to build bigger numbers that were needed to actually swing the game in my favor. Obviously here I'm playing just one copy, so I did take a bit of a risk there. I was sort of bank on the idea that the game just had to be fast, and I'll just try and get some crits along the way, hopefully, but then also rush as well. So I have Thread, which you can see at the top there, which you can basically call and rush with it. To be fair, she doesn't appear enough, unfortunately, even when I play all these cards. So I don't think I had her come in like a good chunk of my games, maybe during Worlds. I can't remember too well, but I did feel a bit like underwhelmed, let's just say, with some of the games that I played, for sure. Most of the ones that I lost, I'd say, I don't think I actually saw this kind of stuff. So that's one of the things. Actually, I also went second in every single game that I lost as well during Worlds. So that's also part of the kind of worry that I had when going in, is like, I mean, the deck can win going second, but it's heavily favored at the opponent, for sure. But if you go first, you're generally doing fine. So that's kind of like another thing to kind of note there. Ruijisa, she's there because she's obviously, as a ride target, you can then find Thread, you can find Ordinal, so you do have some draw engine cards you can go into as well. You may be able to call out Expel Angel or the original Ordinal just for later in the game as well. VAR for the Soul Charge counter charge, because you do need to have access to Marduk as well. There's also Vrachum there. I played 2 copies. I didn't really want to play him, to be honest. I think the format doesn't really, you don't really need him maybe quite as much, but at the same time, there are decks that can sometimes lead you in a situation where you end up needing him. So I kind of just thought of him as sort of an extra defense extender in a way, by just taking a few copies. He's sort of just taking up a few of the slots that I decided to spare. But yeah, you got Freyg at 4 as the main ride, just because I didn't really want to brick. So the idea was that if I'm losing badly, which can happen in quite a handful of games, I just use the CB1 check top 5 and gamble and hope I get CEO Yggdrasil, which Angelica can't do. I can't do like Angelica more often than Freyg if I do have CEO in my hand, obviously. But if I don't have CEO, then obviously I'm going to prefer Freyg as my Vanguard. So those are the kind of I guess a comparison of those two different abilities. Angelica's good because she can give multiple gauges, which obviously helps more against Narukami in some ways, but also helps as well when you're trying to set up having more gauges as well for your plays too. There are some of the other cards I did consider actually. So actually, quick one, the PGs. You may notice here that I'm actually playing one white. Wait, what was it called? Pure White Witch Salty or something. So that card, it's one of those generic discard draw PGs that every clan has. Or sorry, draw and then discard. So you have to ride on Vanguard, and then what you do is you draw one and then discard. So this card was just there at first to kind of also filter. So it's sort of like another V order now, but you're not actually plussing, which is the downside. This card, I used it so that I could at least try and hopefully dig for CEOs or Freygs to ride into as well. That's sort of the idea behind it. But it was sort of like an alternate Sentinel choice you could play if you're not playing like, 3 or 4 Jotuns, for example, because obviously if you play like 1 or 2, it feels a bit weird to do that. You're just playing it purely for the name in that case, because you do need multiple copies to recycle the PG, but it's also GB1, which is a big problem I had with the card Jotun, because I found that I wasn't actually using it much in my games and testing, like very little. So I was actually opening up, I even tested 4 Salties at some points as well, rather than the 4 Regalia PGs. But there is a downside that you are playing too many non-Regalia names as well. That does bite you back too. All Day Now V-Series also has the advantage that, although it's not a Regalia name, it does have 10k shield, so there is that, which is also a motivating factor, because I don't really want to play too many 5ks. But had I not played it, I probably would be playing Jotun. In fact, I've actually changed my list now, and I've got Jotun back in place of Orday now, so there's that as well. And I put in I've put in 2 old Ordains in my current list I've got right this second. So Expel and Ordain are there to prevent you from decking out, but also can help put back keycasts. So Expel can put back Norns if you lose them. You obviously have your G-Guard, Loria, which can also put back your Norns as well, or your CEO Yggdrasils. Ordain now can put CEO Yggdrasils back. It's just extra kind of ways to put cards back, basically, as well. And other than that, there's the Blitz Order, which is also PG, an extra one. You don't really use it as much, but if you end up having it by chance against Shlishma, then that's really nice as well. I put in 2 Sentinel crits because the Tablet Angels don't really do that much, and I was thinking about Steam Maidens, to be honest, when I was deciding to put in Sviti, the Sentinel crit, because I found that when I was using multiple PGs, it was really awkward against Shlishma. Like, I would find that I'm kind of ruining myself a bit on hand advantage, and I'd find myself being forced to lose everything. So the reason why I ended up, in the end, kind of reducing my PGs, which obviously hurt me because of the Bermuda matchup, because I found that players were actually, it does in general suck against Bermuda, but also if they're giving the marks to the Vanguard, which they can get 3 Vanguard swings with, it kind of does make it worse. So I did kind of compromise on that front, and that's kind of part of the problem I had as well. But against Steam Maidens, the Sentinel crits did help in testing and things, because, and I think maybe, no, I don't think it helped in the actual tournament, because I only went against 1 Steam Maiden player. I don't think I actually used the Sentinel crit in that game. But there was actually a really, really strange game where they went first. I think it was Anthony, if I remember correctly. And basically, I then followed up after he rode down to grade 2. And I went to Marduk, I believe, in that turn. Basically, I did like a push turn. And the thing is that I ended up with, I think, 4 cards in hand. Yeah, 4 in hand, but 3 damage. And so he went to Shlishma. 3 damage, 4 cards in hand to guard with. I managed to survive with almost nothing. Basically, I had the OT in my hand, I think, as guard. I think I had a heal or 2 or something. Like, I had basically high quality guard. I think I had a PG as well, if I'm not mistaken. Something like that, I can't remember, but they're all high quality guards. There might have been a stride crit, I'm not sure. But basically, every card could guard like an individual attack, and I had like Yggdrasil and 2 Norns on field. So I actually had to sacrifice my Norn and Yggdrasil. Unfortunately, I picked the one behind Vanguard because I didn't really expect to keep drawing into my CEO Yggdrasil, so that caused me to have insufficient push power to actually push back next game. But yeah, one of the reasons why I survived was because there was no extender, so it was literally just a 6 attack Schlichma turn. There was 2 Eluls called to rearguard, Vanguard swing, Eluls come back, and then Schlichma call from G zone. So yeah, that was it's just a case of okay, I can maybe take 2. I can use a G guard to handle 2 more attacks, and then whatever few cards I had left, use that on the remaining attacks. That's basically how I survived the turn. But I had to rely heavily on the Minerva Stride, and unfortunately it fell off, so it didn't really work well. And I couldn't push. I couldn't get the soul to do the extra 10k power, so that kind of caused me a lot of problems because that extra power may have been what I needed to win the game. But I ended up swinging for 28 2 times, and Bearlock was easy enough to stop me with 3 and 0 drives. So yeah, that's kind of like one of the that's kind of like the reason I played it. Was I played just because of Schlichma, the Sentinel crit, and also because GB1 PGs, by the way, one of the reasons I didn't want to play Jotun is because of all this riding down. They don't really give you a chance to use Jotun unless you're playing your list specifically around Gleipnir and things. And that's kind of a problem with Recycle PGs at the moment. But it feels almost like the Regalia name is actually doing more work than the actual effect itself, let's just say. So that's just another thing. Yeah, but there's a whole bunch of different things I've tried. I've tried even Himiko, I've tried Fenrir as a grade 3. I have tried like testing so many cards as well up until that point. Let me just see if I can find stuff. Oh yeah, I've obviously tried this card, Astrea for Heavens, as well, which obviously I did in Italy. I maybe could have played it still. It wasn't really a plus. I was kind of gunning for the pluses instead. I have also tried... Let's just see if I've got anything else around here. Just as an example, this card here. So this is a bit of a random choice, but this promo, it can stack your deck basically as well. I had also looked into that. I think you really just need defensive cards, to be honest, in this format. I've even tried Honley, by the way. This card was being considered, but it would have only been going against Steam Maiden, and there were some kind of issues with like trying to draw into cards because you're playing less good cards in your deck basically that help the already fairly inconsistent Regalia deck. So cards that say draw 1 like Ordinal or Flap Angel, which can search for your grade 3s, are much more useful if you just want to be able to play the game. What I felt like when I tried Honley is that I was finding a lot of less consistent games where it's like, okay, cool, you can try and guard against Spike Brothers and Steam Maidens, provided you're not giving them too much damage. But then you go against Reindeer or something, right? And you just shoot yourself in the foot, because what you're doing then is that your deck is working against itself and you just don't draw into the pieces you need, and that's the kind of problem. But this card is actually quite effective in Regalia because of Thread, the grade 2 Regalia. Basically for free, you basically just call her, get a gauge, then at Nimbal that she attacks or boosts, you can give the gauge to Honley, and then Frey would then give immunity to the card so that Honley can't be sniped with Mikani or something, right? So there was a lot of things that I did look into as well. Like, God, there's so many Genesis cards. I've even tried like Vine as well. I've looked at the Gleipnir. I've even tried variations around Achilles. I've tried even this, by the way, which was a very interesting thing. But yes, I've tried these as well. So there's a lot of stuff. I've gone through like a lot of different things with the testing, and even Vanguard, I've tried that too. There's a hell of a lot of things. So I can go on probably forever and try and remind myself, but obviously for the interest of keeping this video a bit more shorter, that's basically my experience. Spent 2 months trying to perfect. I did think Regalia definitely had the topping potential. The issue is with Regalia is the consistency, and it works against itself a lot more than the opponent. If the opponent's playing decks that are very fast and does punish you for not keeping up with tempo, which is what Steam Maiden and Reindeer were, then the deck kind of falls apart. So that's kind of the problem I found, and I think whenever I spoke to people at Regalia, that's generally what people are talking about when they, like, it kind of sums up why the deck isn't played much. At Worlds, apparently this was the only Genesis deck that was played. Obviously there's not going to be any other variants besides Regalia, because it's the only one that's actually on the map right now because of over a year ago's restriction list basically. So if you do see Genesis at the moment, it's probably only going to be Regalia. maybe they'll change things because there is the V and P series set that's coming out, and there's going to be a lot of erratas. So I'm hoping that they do something with that that's going to basically make the other stuff good as well. And then I want to also go through a G zone as well. So I'm going to scroll down a bit. So let's see, does it capture? Well, looks like the page doesn't go any further down than this. I could just move this up. No, that's not really doing anything either. So anyway, the G zone. There's one change I made here, which is that the G guard on the top left, the Dragon G guard that recently came out. I was playing 2 of this before. The reason I cut it down to 1 now is because they banned the piano. So I played 2 because of the piano doing the whole battle door thing, and the G guard was sort of my way to kind of play around it a bit more. But with it being banned, there was no need for me to play 2 of them because it's only for that one matchup. So I made room to play a second Marduk because I started realizing against Steam Maidens, I did actually need a second Marduk. I was testing some games on the plane with Stefan. Stefan is basically, he's someone who almost made it to Worlds. He was hanging out with us in LA, but basically he had like this really awful top 4 where he got some of the worst hands, especially compared to the opponent in that top 4. And yeah, it was really bad what happened, but his deck kind of helped me to confirm when testing with it that I definitely need to play 2 Marlocks, because what I was doing is that I was getting rid of everything on my field because I was desperate to try and just survive a powerful Schlishma OTK. And obviously in the process, by losing everything, that means you have nothing to play with. Now I play Frag as the grade 3 in this deck, so the idea is that at least you can sort of clutch into a comeback play. So what you could do is you go Frag, hopefully get CEO, or maybe you have CEO already as some random card that's still lingering out for some reason. But otherwise, then you just go for the Sword Blast 6 and go into Marduk, and then you still hit heavy with it as well, or build somewhat of a hand as well. So that even a Steam Maiden deck, if a Steam Maiden deck doesn't have like any actual hand, they don't really like go off that hard anyway. So you can sort of play this sort of like really kind of sluggish, I guess like it's almost like a cat fight kind of game. You know, when those sort of games where you get like obviously there's a lot of explosive degenerate stuff in Vanguard, right? But you know when you have like, when both players, they're like lacking resources and they just kind of like punch back like really weakly at each other. It's like those sort of games basically. So like Marduk can at least get you like the extra few pluses so that you can sort of just stay in, maybe survive another a very weak powered Steam Maiden turn, and then you just have one of those kind of games. And then I've got Laurie obviously to put deck out. I didn't play Iris. Iris is something to consider, but I did value the second Marduk. So you can sort of do some things to Iris by using Ear. I think this deck, a lot of times it doesn't really use Iris. Like there's very, very obscure situations where you feel like, oh darn, I needed Iris, I wish I was playing Iris. But it doesn't happen as much just by cutting any of these other cards out. So that's why everything else is still there as well. And that's kind of it. Muspel I think is important because she's a counter charger, and you never know if your opponent randomly damage denies you. So I think that's probably it for the deck profile. Obviously I've kind of weakened it by playing like only 2 PGs against Reindeer, but I did strength against Steam Maidens. I was on a roll at the start. I won my first 2 games, and then I got paired against my teammate Maxime, which went horribly. Basically I was second, as every other game I lost, but I went second and I got grade stuck. And then once I was finding a way to actually play back in, because I basically I kind of denied him resources, but I kind of forced him in a position where he wasn't really able to farm hand. So the idea was to try and like just try and sack him out once I reached my stride, basically. That was what I was thinking about doing. I think he chose not to go into his stride. I think because Heltruda would have sucked, if I'm not mistaken. So he couldn't really go for that like high-powered first stride turn to capitalize, because I didn't really like give him that chance for it to actually be worth going to Heltruda. So I think I played like really well considering I was 2 grades behind. But the thing that stopped me from reaching grade 3, like getting my head out the water and just getting that air that I needed, was the over trigger. I went from 5 to 6. So that was the end of that, and I won the next game. There was 2 more rounds left. I lost against Steve Mayans in a very tight, close game, and then at that point, last round, done. That was basically it. So barely made us close. I was kind of hoping to get top 8 because I've been to Worlds like 4 times now. So there's always like something, and it's just like I feel like I have to try and get that top 8 one of these days. But I think this time around, I felt like I wanted to get top 8 more than I did in the previous years, because I've been going too many times now. It gets to a point where it kind of just starts to eat a bit at you. You kind of just think, darn, I really want to just kind of not just get top 8 in just one of these world championships that I keep going to. Like, yeah, so that was it. Like I think the last round was a deciding round. If I had won that, I would have made top 8. My opponent didn't make it because his ranking wasn't quite there in the end. But on the plus side, a few of my friends managed to basically win worlds, 2 different ones, and that's all in all. It's been like there's like other things that end up being really happy about. So it was a good weekend all in all. I think the only thing is I gotta say is that World Championships, now that I've been 4 times, but I've been saying like every year, they really should be doing best of 3. It just feels like a bit. There's some things with the tournament structure just doesn't justify it, because you have players who basically go and qualify events. So you travel to these different regions, you go qualify for Worlds, right? And if you don't get first place, you obviously pay to travel to the World Championships, which is on the other side of the world for a lot of people. And you're just going there for basically a best 1 game. That's very cutthroat, and just because you bricked basically, or you get OT'd, which is now a thing, suddenly you're now just disregarded from the competition, and it just feels like, do those players deserve to be disqualified like that? I mean, I've experienced many times. I'm obviously saying it because it's my own personal experience, but I've known this is a complaint that's been going on for a long time, and I'm just not sure like what happened to like no one really talks about it anymore. People used to talk about it back then, but here we are. So yeah, that's just some other kind of ramblings, because I did like a blog the other day with Dave, but I don't think I touched on that topic. So I'm using this video as an opportunity to kind of mention this kind of thought I had as well. I just kept thinking about it over and over in my head. I'm just like, yeah, no, I need to express this in like one of my videos one of these days. So yeah, that's kind of it. Hope you enjoyed the deck profile. So just to sum up, this is not the definitive Regalia list. I don't believe there is an optimal Regalia list. I've tried so many different lists. They all have issues, and they're all almost as good as each other, actually, strangely enough. There's different kind of tastes and different kind of play styles. It all depends on how you draw. And obviously, like, all these hands suck if you don't draw well. Some of these cards are good in the early game. Some of these cards are good in the later game. It's basically simple as that. And obviously, the format might change soon. And I do think they're probably going to do something about the whole ride-down force scaling thing. So we just have to wait and see what that does, because that could end up changing things in terms of how we should deck build. But we've now got D series set 8, Minerva Rising. I have been tinkering around with some of the cards. There are a few interesting cards in there as well. I'm not sure like how much to push things, but like I don't think they're really that much of a creep, but there are definitely some interesting options in how you can change the playstyle of the deck as well. So that's something to look for as well. So anyway, until then, I will see you guys in the next one.